Hey guys, so this week I'm going to be kicking off Slime Week, where each day I will upload a different video where I make something squishy, slimy, whatever. And we're actually going to start off this week with one that's probably the least slimy. I'm going to be making homemade Play-Doh. It is non-toxic. It actually doesn't require cream of tartar, which a lot of the recipes do. That's not typically something that people have lying around. This particular recipe does have all things that are probably just found right in your pantry or your refrigerator. So pretty simply, what you're going to do, here are our ingredients. You're going to start by mixing together your dry ingredients in a bowl, your flour and your salt, and then your wet ingredients, water, lemon juice, oil, and food coloring. You are going to heat them up in a small or a medium-sized saucepan. You don't want them to boil, you just want them to get pretty warm, maybe a little bit hot. I have other here because you may also like to add something to your dough, like an essential oil, something that smells nice, more food coloring, maybe if you wanted to like mix two together, that's completely up to you. I put about 10 drops of food coloring in my mix and I got a nice dark color. So you start by warming your wet ingredients and then slowly stir in your dry ones. You can combine them in a bowl ahead of time and then slowly add them and keep stirring it with a spatula. You'll notice that it will start to thicken and clump together to form your dough. At that point, you're going to just turn off the heat and transfer the mixture to some wax paper, allow it to cool off, and then you can knead it all the way together with your hand. The final product is pretty nice. I have it right here. It's still a little bit warm, but you can see nice solid color. It has the exact consistency of Play-Doh that you would buy at the store. And again, it is completely non-toxic, safe to play with. It does have food coloring in it, and you'll notice my hands are perfectly clean. Nothing is sticking to me. The food coloring isn't coming out or anything like that. And you can store this in a container, room temperature, for as long as, eventually, because it doesn't have any preservatives in it, and it is just made with flour and different things, it might go bad after a little while. You want to ditch it. But as long as these items would last, and say something like bread or a muffin or something like that, you could keep this around. I'm just going to wrap mine up in wax paper. Now, a couple of things that you can talk about with your child when you do this. The first thing is that most solids, whether they are metal or ionic, or even something like plastic, things like that, a lot of them tend to have a crystalline structure. So if you were to look at them under a really, really high-powered microscope type thing, you would see that they have geometric patterns, things like cubes and stuff like that. When a solid doesn't have a crystalline shape and its shape can be changed pretty easily, this is called an amorphous solid. When you put A at the front of a word, obviously it means without, so amorphous would be without shape. So that's a word that you can teach your child when you are playing with any kind of Play-Doh. Now, during the actual making of the Play-Doh, a couple of things that you could talk about with your child are, when you mix together the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients, you are creating a mixture because there isn't a chemical reaction that's happening. But when you introduce the wet and the dry ingredients and you start adding that heat, you do get a new substance. So a chemical reaction does happen there. And a way that you can explain that to your kid is, so for example, if you mix together flour and salt, which you might compare and contrast those with your child, if you mix those two things together, could you separate them? You could. It might be a pain in the butt, but if you like took what are they called, like a strainer thing, the one that has like a screen, if you got one that allowed the flour to sift through but not the salt, you could separate them. You could, in theory, separate them piece by piece. It would take you an eternity, but you could do it. Same thing with like if you mix oil and water, right? You can separate those two things. Just let them, do their thing where the oil will float to the top, and then you can decant or pour out the oil. So when things are mixed physically, you can somehow separate them still. They haven't reacted and formed a new substance. But then you can ask your child, once you've got this, is there any way you can get the salt back? Is there any way you can just take the flour out of here? The answer is no. And so that really shows you that a chemical reaction has happened in this case. Chemical reactions, while they can be reversed, typically it's not easy for us to do that under normal conditions. So there's your first little thing to try at home for Slime Week. Stay tuned as I will, like I said, have a different activity for you to try each day. Thanks, guys.